No. We're not celebrating Rex Archer's retirement for like the, fourth straight year. I just wanted to congratulate Kool and the Gang as we start the show for their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Just heard that top of the hour. So big congrats. Big old congrats to Kool and the Gang. One of our favorite rejoins to use here on the show. Cher, Ozzy Osbourne, Peter Frampton, Mary J. Blige, and Dave Matthews, Foreigner, A Tribe Called Quest, all heading to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and an announcement that came down late last night. So hope you had a great weekend. We appreciate you starting your week with us here on 95.7 FM KCMO. If you maybe didn't have the weekend you thought you might have, maybe the weekend came up short of your expectations, well, you could have been Denny Hoskins, state senator who's running for Secretary of State in Missouri, or Jay Ashcroft, the current Secretary of State who's running for governor in Missouri, because these two guys went viral for this interaction that took place in Perry County, Missouri, other side of the state, on Friday night. And they got into this verbal altercation. I'll set it up with the following. According to Denny Hoskins, Jay Ashcroft had wrapped up his speech in Perry County, Missouri. It's an election year, so all these guys are going to all these different Lincoln Days events, and, they're doing everything they can to get in front of the people. Denny Hoskins, who is our state senator right down the road in Warrensburg, he alleges that after Jay Ashcroft gave his speech in Perry County on Friday, he came up to Denny Hoskins' wife, Michelle, who was seated at a table. And Denny Hoskins alleges that Jay Ashcroft pointed his finger in her face and, quote, barked off to her. That is when Denny Hoskins confronted Jay Ashcroft in the back of the room and called him a few choice words. Let's roll the tape.
She was looking at you when you walked by. You're a chicken. You are a chicken. Yes, I know. You're a chicken. If you got something to say, be man enough to stay.
I'm going to work with the legislature.
No, you haven't.
Perhaps
said that the Secretary of State doesn't control libraries.
Trying to shrink it into Missouri. It's not just the big cities.
You're a chicken.
Little towns as well.
If I went up to your wife and pushed her out,
whenever crime goes around,
if I went up to your wife and said something to her, you'd probably just fall down on your knees and be a coward. You're a coward.
We've got to do better for our law enforcement.
You're a
The next one.
All right, well, you got the gist of it right there. That is Denny Hoskins calling Jay Ashcroft a chicken bleep, a bleeping coward, and just unloading on the current Secretary of State and gubernatorial hopeful at the Perry County Lincoln Days event that took place on Friday night. Denny Hoskins goes on the note here on his social media. And by the way, Denny Hoskins will be here at 8:15 this morning to respond to all this. He said, quote, I'll always honor and defend my wife, and I won't tolerate another man putting his finger in my wife's face and barking off because, quote, she looked at him. If he has a problem with me, be a man and talk to me about it, writes Denny Hoskins. Don't be a bully to my wife and upset her. He then alleges that one of his opponents in the Secretary of State's race is the one who posted this video to try to embarrass him. But he says, I'll never be embarrassed about sticking up for my wife, especially when another man is out of line, and the vast majority of men would do the same for their wife. Now, I don't know either of these people well, but I've seen Jay Ashcroft in a lot of these settings. I mean, the guy's been going to every Lincoln Day in the state, as far as I can tell, for the better part of, the 6-7 years I've been doing this. Literally, he just shows up. I mean, it's impressive, but it's also I kind of wonder, Jay, you trying to get away from the family? What's going on here? I say that tongue in cheek because I know he loves the people of Missouri, but I've seen the guy at a lot of public events. I have not seen anything that Denny Hoskins has alleged take place involving Jay Ashcroft. And I say this as well with all the love and respect. Jay Ashcroft's kind of like he always talks about how he's an engineer when he does his stump speech. And I don't mean this as any disrespect to engineers, but he comes off like an engineer, if you see what I'm going for here, okay? That's just kind of who he is. I, having been to dozens of these events over the years, have a hard time seeing Jay Ashcroft walking up to another man's wife, sticking his finger in her face, and barking off at her. That's not the guy I've seen. Now, I wasn't there, so I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm not denying what Denny Hoskins is saying at all. I'm just saying, based on the interactions I've seen with Jay Ashcroft at dozens of these events, that would be a major surprise to me had that actually happened. So then it comes down to, who do you want to believe? Well, Jay Ashcroft, I reached out to him privately yesterday. I said, hey, do you want to come on to talk about this? And he said, I appreciate the offer, but there's nothing else that really needs to be said. He said, I neither insulted his wife nor pointed at her. He said, Denny Hoskins' outbursts are concerning, and I hope he gets help. As much as everyone wants to keep talking about this, my focus is on fighting for the people of the state of Missouri. That's what Jay Ashcroft said to me in a private note. So he will not be joining the show today. Denny Hoskins will at about 8:20 this morning. So we'll get his side of this. But Jay Ashcroft did respond briefly on one media platform, and it was over the weekend, and it was to Mike Carter, who you may be hearing some of the ads for on this show. Let's roll the tape of Jay Ashcroft.
Well, it's stressful running a campaign. We're all putting miles on the car. I think I put about 10,000 miles on the car last month. And I just think the stress got to him. Obviously, there are disagreements on policy, and I do tend to point out places where the Senate has failed to do things that they should have done. And I think emotion just got the better of him. And, hopefully he's going to have Sunday off, and, it's in the past.
All right. That's Jay Ashcroft responding to the situation over the weekend, and that's all we will be getting from him on this issue. And he just wants to move on to his next stop and take this thing on to the next level. So, we'll see. I just know this much. It is silly political season, and you get some silly, ridiculous things taking place, and this is just the latest, it seems like. And in Missouri, it can get very silly. It can get very, very silly. And now it's up to you. I mean, was that really just a moment to embarrass Denny Hoskins, as he alleges, by one of his Secretary of State opponents? Or do you say, you know what, if the guy was truly defending his wife and his wife's honor, then I don't mind that one bit. You do what you got to do. If that means you got to call another guy a chicken bleep and, a bleeping coward, then you do what you got to do. That's now up to the voter to decide what they want in their Secretary of State. If they think Jay Ashcroft is the guy that Denny Hoskins alleges he is from this Perry County Lincoln Day on Friday night, that is going to be up to you, the Missouri voter, come August when the primaries take place. In the meantime, we have got to get to this. I'm going to throw out a scenario for you here. Let's just say the Klan was marching all over college campuses and were intimidating students of color. You think the media, you think this White House would put up with this kind of insanity? You think the universities would put up with this kind of insanity that we've seen the last couple of days? It's not happening in any local universities yet that I'm aware of, but we got to make sure it doesn't get that far. If you have not seen the insanity from college campuses across the country, we'll share it with you next on KCMO 95.7 FM and stream us this morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Just for a second, imagine a world where black students at any university in this country were taunted with chants of go back to Africa. Imagine a gay student at any university in this country surrounded by homophobic protesters and hit in the eye with a flagpole. Or, I don't know, imagine a campus, just any college campus, where a campus imam, let's say, told a Muslim student that they ought to head home for Ramadan because, well, campus public safety can't guarantee their own security. What do you think would happen when it came to the media and the condemnation from every single politician in every corner of this country? It would be very stark. Everybody would have an opinion. Everybody would be on the same side. But this past weekend, if you haven't seen any of this audio or any of this footage at places like Columbia and Yale, Student demonstrators did all of the above. But because it was directed at Jews, we just kind of say, meh, is what it is. You had Jewish students at Columbia getting told to go back to Poland. You had a Jewish woman at Yale assaulted with a Palestinian flag. And you have Orthodox rabbis at Columbia telling students to go home for their safety. Take a listen to some of what this sounded like. This is a Jewish student just trying to walk through campus at Yale over the weekend, and he's literally getting blocked by Palestinian protesters. They are not letting him walk around campus.
You're literally touching us.
I'm gonna let you walk. That's right. I'm gonna walk you around. Yes, I'm just trying to walk around. Let me walk around.
But you can walk through us.
We're here.
Don't get in my way.
He's allowed to walk.
That is from Yale over the weekend. And as of this morning, this just came down here in the last few minutes, Columbia has canceled in-person classes. All in-person classes are canceled today after the anti-Israel protests inundated campus this weekend, and there's now an encampment that has resulted in the arrest of over 100 protesters. They basically have a modern-day, a 2024 Chaz going on at Columbia and at Yale. You remember Chaz? Chaz was like the tent city that popped up in, I want to say Chaz was in Portland. Or was it Seattle? It was in Seattle, John?
Chaz and Chop.
That's right.
It had two names.
Yeah, it did. I think it was Chopped at
first, I think.
And then it became Chaz.
That sounds cooler.
Yeah, it did sound a little bit cooler. So those were these tent communities and tent cities that popped up in 2020 in Seattle. And, you had drugs going on left and right, crime. It was a bleep show at this place. That's basically what these Ivy League universities have turned into over the last couple of days. They have become places where anti-Israel sentiments are running rampant. And they're doing it under the guise of being pro-Palestinian. But it's really not that. It is outward anti-Semitism that is taking place on these college campuses. And the fact is, you don't have the leadership right now to take care of it. I mean, if you look at some of these pictures, it literally looks like a third world country in the middle of the supposedly most prestigious group of universities in the country. I know most of us are never going to be able to send their kids to Ivy Leagues, and I include myself in that. Assuming they are my children and they have my brains, they will not be going to an Ivy League university, okay? Unless there's an accident that I'm not aware of. So that being said, this isn't for most of us. Like, we'll never send our kids to Columbia. Most of us aren't going to be able to do that anyway. That being said, when you talk about American culture on college campuses around the country, here's my fear. Here's my concern. That this stuff does not get nipped in the bud at Columbia and Yale, and it comes to universities near us. It comes to UMKC. It comes to KU. You've already seen, elements of this in our area universities. There's been, they call themselves pro-Palestinian organizations. I would call them something else, that have done events and, held gatherings at UMKC. And there's been a little bit of that at KU as well. But I'm concerned that this stuff leads to other students at other campuses all over America. And they say to themselves, hey, why not? We should be doing, this looks like a great time. We should be doing stuff like this. Yeah. And then you get the radical professors who are kind of wink, wink, nod, nod, nudging them along, saying, yeah, you start your own little deal just like Columbia and Yale. And before you know it, this stuff has spread beyond the Ivy League universities. That's my fear right now. But you look at what's going on at some of the most prominent universities in America today. You have classes that are being held virtually at Columbia in an attempt to de-escalate the situation on campus. That's what's happening right now. They have just canceled classes for today. And I don't see any end in sight to this whole thing. Leadership is hoping that this goes away, and this is the problem. All right, this is the problem when you find yourself in a position where you are not on the morally right side of an issue. You end up having to cater and acquiesce to the insane, to the people who are out there claiming that they're all pro-Palestinian, when what you're really seeing is rampant anti-Semitism taking place on these campuses. That's what's happening right now. And the media is going along with it, by the way. The media is they're having a great time. NBC News headline, Columbia to hold classes virtually as Jewish leaders warn about safety amid tensions over pro-Palestinian protests. Everything about that is propaganda from the very top at NBC. Columbia to hold classes virtually as Jewish leaders warn about safety. So they're admitting that Jewish students right now are in danger amid tensions. Just a little tense. You got people getting beaten with flagpoles on these campuses because of their religious affiliation. There's a little bit of tension there on campus. Pro-Palestinian protests is what they're calling these things still. And within this article from NBC News, they're very sympathetic to the protesters. They write in part, protesters have decried Israel's bombardment of Gaza, which has displaced over 75% of the estimated 2.3 million people in the enclave and killed over 34,000 people there, according to Gaza health officials. So basically, NBC News is taking Hamas propaganda and reporting it as fact.
They have been doing that.
That's what they're doing.
Every story I read.
Yeah, according to Gaza health officials. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is giving them that information? Okay, that's Hamas, who runs Gaza, giving out that information. Not saying there haven't been innocent people killed, but this is how Hamas is running its operation, right? They get to attack Israel, kill 1,000 people, and then play the victim card. And they're playing the victim card by using innocent lives as human shields. That's what they do. And if we live in a world where the worst terrorists on planet Earth can use innocent people as human shields to protect themselves, and it can work, then that's your answer on how terrorists beat all of us. That's how they take down the West. If you want to live in a world where the worst actors on the planet can do whatever they want and slaughter whoever they want, and then they can claim victim status and hide behind innocent individuals, and nothing gets done, and nothing happens to them, what kind of world is that? Coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio, speaking of college campuses, if you have daughters, what happened on Friday with Title IX should scare the crap out of you. I'll explain next. Wake up today. Maybe you got 3 daughters like I do. Maybe you got 1. Maybe you got 2. Maybe you got more than 3. Or you've got none. It really doesn't matter. If you're waking up today on a Monday morning and you are of the belief that men and women are different, if you are of the belief that men and women should not be competing in sports against each other, if you are of the belief that men and women should not be changing in locker rooms and showering together, well, guess what? Today's a bad day for you. Today is a bad day for those of us with common sense in Kansas City and around the country. And this was a classic Friday news dump by the administration as they tweaked Title IX rules to protect what they call LGBTQ students and sexual assault victims. But let's be honest, we know what this is really about. It's very obvious what this is really about. What this is really about is making it so that now you have a situation in this country that under Title IX, you have to abide by federal law. You have to abide by these laws to receive federal money, which, by the way, every school that you walk into does receive some federal monies. You have to abide by these incredibly insane laws now to get your federal money. There is not a school that can exist in this country without some federal dollars. And the Biden administration just told every person who supports women, who supports women's athletics, to pound sand. Now, they don't directly address this issue, but the new rules, the new Title IX rules from the Biden administration now forbids discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. There it is. Gender identity is now under the Joe Biden Title IX rules. That's what this is about. Sex discrimination includes discrimination based on gender identity as well as sexual orientation. They write here, a school must not separate or treat people differently based on sex, except in limited circumstances under the provisions. And by the way, what does that mean? That includes, and it is in the description here, gender identity. They have added that to their Title IX rules and regulations. Which means if you're a school now and you want to find yourself in a position where you don't think it's right for a male to compete against females, you don't think that a male should be allowed to use the women's bathroom, you are putting your federal dollars at risk, meaning you're putting the entire school at risk. They knew what they were doing when they added gender identity to the Title IX rules over the weekend. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they did it under the guise of protecting LGB students. That's nothing to do with a gay student. This has nothing to do with someone who is gay and is competing in sports, because that's irrelevant, right? That doesn't matter when you talk about sports. Someone's sexual preference and orientation has nothing to do with their ability to play sports. Someone who is a biological male who is getting set to play women's sports does have a clear competitive advantage. We've seen that time and time again. So what do they do in an election year? And this is just absolutely insane. This is not about appealing to the independent voter. This is not about, getting that swing voter in Georgia, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania. It's not about any of that. It is about doubling down on insane. It is about doubling down on a base and getting a base out to vote, because that's unfortunately where we seem to find ourselves right now in American politics. Whoever can turn out the biggest number of crazy may end up winning an election, which is nuts. But this right here, you can find yourself in a position this morning on a Monday where you get up and you bemoan the fact that we've got two presidential candidates and you may not like either of them. And that's your prerogative. It really is. But just ask yourself, just have an honest conversation with yourself and ask yourself, as you're sipping your coffee this morning, you're sitting in the car, you're driving down 435 eastbound, which I'm looking out to right now. Ask yourself the following. Do you want to raise your daughter or daughters in an environment where now the federal government says if they are bothered, if they think it's inherently unfair that they have to compete against a biological male, or they have to be in a locker room with said biological male, they're the bigot and there's nothing that can be done about it? Forget what you think the tax rate should be. Forget what you think the best foreign policy is. I throw it all out the window. Do you think it's morally acceptable to live in a country, supposedly the best country in the history of mankind? I still believe that, but I question it on some days. Do you want to look your daughters in the eye and say, I will vote for somebody who decides to put men potentially in my daughter's locker rooms, and there's nothing that they can do about it? 913-408-7957, because that's exactly what we're talking about now with these new Title IX rules. Gender identity is now protected. And on top of that, it does apply to colleges, yes, public schools, elementary and high schools that receive federal money. And the update is set to take effect in August. Now, is this going to impact every school in the country? No, it won't. But it will impact more than most of us realize. So suddenly, if you sat there and you said to yourself, gosh, I better get the best people on the school boards here locally in Kansas City. I mean, yeah, that's still important. It is still very much important. But it is not, unfortunately, the be-all, end-all anymore, because the federal government is basically threatening our local schools. That's what they're doing. They are turning local public education into their bully pulpit and using it for whatever kind of social experiments they see fit. And by the way, I don't think that's ending anytime soon if they continue on with the power that they have. I'd love to be wrong about that, but I don't see that changing anytime soon. 913-408-7957 is our studio line and our text line here on KCMO. This is, right now, this is one of those things that when you think back to Title IX and all the good that it did, right? I mean, the stories. I wasn't alive when it passed in the early 70s, but you go back and you hear from people who were alive then, who are like, wow, this is my moment. Title IX passes. You're a little girl. You know, you're rejoicing. You're going to have the opportunities that your mother never had. Well, now Joe Biden takes flames to the entire thing. And if you're a proponent of women's sports and you want to protect women's sports, well, this is a moment for you to basically look in the mirror and say, what do I really care about? What are my priorities? And what do I truly find important when I go to the polls this fall or any other time, John?
It's funny when people believe in women's sports, it's usually about equal pay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, suddenly there are men and women.
Yeah. Yes. Yes,
Right?
That's right. That is so true. Suddenly men and women are different.
Yeah.
Until they're not. Until, the
Yeah.
next Will Thomas starts winning NCAA championships and walking into the girls' locker room, and it's like, whoa, what's that thing? Until that happens. Unbelievable. That was a Friday news dump that I wanted to make sure we did not miss here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Coming up, top of the hour, Clay and Platte County have responded to Mayor Quentin Lucas and his plans to welcome illegal immigrants to Kansas City to quote-unquote work. But next, another bad news event on the plaza over the weekend. Got a little bit of coverage, not enough. We'll tell you what happened on the plaza next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM and stream us at KCMOTalkRadio.com. Man, oh man, you love to see the spin. A good job by Bill O'Reilly, by the way. Not exactly a chummy Monday morning message. I hope you never end up in a court of law. Yeah, me too, Bill. And I know I ain't calling jungle law if that happens. Whoop, doop, whoop. As he got the monkeys flying through the air on his ads there. But yeah, Bill's right. Bill's very much right about that. Meantime, the way the media is covering this Title IX controversy from Friday, where the Biden administration put out a new set of rules, overhauling the Trump administration's Title IX rules. It is so interesting how they spin this. So what this basically does, all right, is it makes it so that gender identity is covered under Title IX. So now, if you're a man you're a male and you identify as a female, you're protected under Title IX. Title IX, intended to protect women, no longer protects women against men. That's what it is. I don't care. I don't want to hear about this gender identity. You can have sympathy and empathy and be kind to somebody who is struggling with their own identity. You can do all those things. I think we all should treat people with the kindness and respect, that we want to receive. I think that's important. But it's also imperative to stand up for women. It doesn't mean you have to be a jerk to somebody. It doesn't mean you have to mistreat somebody. But you have to stand up for women. And these new Title IX rules are no longer about standing up for women. You now have schools all the way down to elementary who will have the threat of their federal funding taken away if they do not play by these made-up guidelines of letting boys be girls. And vice versa, but obviously girls being boys is less of a problem in sports than boys being girls. Because, boys as time goes on are stronger and faster and bigger and all those things that, we agreed on for thousands of years as civilized society. But now here we are in 2024, and that's like a thing of the past. So I'm reading all the articles I can read on this over the weekend, and I'm seeing how this is being spun by media. And this really stood out to me from USA Today. And I know I haven't seen a USA Today since I was staying at a Comfort Inn 10 years ago when they would dump them off, outside your hotel room. Remember that was a thing? You'd just wake up in a hotel and there'd be a USA Today and you'd be like, oh, yeah, I forgot those existed.
I think they still have them by the front desk.
Oh, do they still? Yeah, they're probably, you think the Kansas City Star is a shell of what it used to be? I got to imagine USA Today is just nothing compared to what it was. But that was always cool. Even though, I say this as someone who's a millennial, it was always cool to see that USA Today outside of a hotel room when you'd stay there. So USA Today covered this in a very, very partisan, propaganda-driven manner. Here's what they write in their piece. It's just headlined, by the way, updated Biden administration rules will soon affect students across the U.S. What to know. They say here, students and school employees across America will be impacted in the fall by new changes to a rule that affects all federally funded schools. Practically, it's a sweeping update to how schools will have to handle sex discrimination and abuse cases. Politically, it's part of a power struggle between the Trump and Biden administrations. It's really not a power struggle between administrations. It's a power struggle between common sense and insanity. It's got nothing to do with Trump and Biden. What's new, writes USA Today? The Biden administration released a new set of rules this week, overhauling the Trump administration's Title IX rules, which they write here gave more rights to alleged perpetrators of sexual assault and harassment. No, that is not true. It just gave them their day in court. And I'll get to more of that part of this Title IX insanity next hour, but I'll leave that on the side for now. The new rule also stipulates further protections for LGBTQ plus students, as well as parents and pregnant students. Notice how they lump in lesbian, gay, bisexual into this. It's not about them. It's got nothing to do with any student who's gay. It never was about them. But they get lumped into this LGBTQ plus IA division sign exclamation point group to make it sound good. What this did, the tweak in the Title IX rules that the administration did on Friday was a very simple one. Because, USA Today is not going to get to the point here. It is about gender identity. They eventually get there a few more paragraphs down. They write here, LGBTQ plus students will be guaranteed protection under the law if they are discriminated against for their gender identity or sexual orientation. Well, no one cares if you're gay and you're playing a sport. That's irrelevant, right? That's never been a problem in this country. Your gender, your sexual orientation has never been a sore spot in any athletic event that I've seen anywhere in the country in recent, certainly recent American history. But they include gender identity and they act like they're making it about gay students when it's not about them. They are protecting men who want to compete against women. Let's be very clear on what this is and what this is about. It is about protecting men competing against women, and it is not at all about protecting young women. Not at all about that. And you don't have to have 3 daughters like me to be passionate about this. You just need to be somebody who believes that men and women are different. God made us differently, and this is not rocket science, and this is not controversial. And you got to everyone needs to stand up to the insanity of what this is really about. Harris Faulkner has actually moved to 8:30, so I apologize for that. Harris Faulkner at 8:30. So we've got more of you right after the news here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. No truth to the rumors that as part of the Title IX overhaul by the administration last week, that they are also getting set to announce that the NCAA would be required to provide free testicular cancer screening for all women's athletes. That is not true. For those of you wondering, I'm getting that question a lot, and that is not the case. All right, so we're all square on that. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. But yes, they are announcing, and they did announce in a Friday news dump, that gender identity is now protected under Title IX. And here's an amazing quote from Miguel Cardona. He is the Secretary of Education. The quote from Miguel Cardona reads as follows. These final regulations build on the legacy of Title IX by clarifying that all of our nation's students can access schools that are safe, welcoming, and respect their rights. This is like stuff out of parody. We're building on the legacy of Title IX, which protected and built up women's athletics over 50 years ago by destroying it by including gender identity, meaning you define yourself as whatever you want to be and you can compete in women's sports. Think about that. His quote says this is building on the legacy of Title IX. It is destroying the original intent of Title IX. That all our nation's students can access schools that are safe, welcoming, and respect their rights. Of course, except for women who may not want to do things like, change in the locker room with a guy who feels like a chick on any given day. Outside of them, everybody else is going to feel safe and welcomed. And you got to respect their rights, not the rights of, your daughters and my daughters. Robert in Kansas City, what's happening? Robert, good morning. Happy Monday.
Hey, happy Monday, Pete. So, man, I'm a disaffected Republican, conservative, Christian, and I can't stand what Trump's done to my party. Way too populist, way too much grievance politics. But this is going to make me vote for him. And I think about this in other swing states. It's insane. It's just insane.
Robert, thank you. And I don't think you're alone. Here's the problem right now. If you get off of social media, you realize that there are a lot of people just like Robert out there who are sitting back and they're looking at the political landscape and they don't really love either guy. I mean, they certainly don't like Joe. And with Trump, they're not going to rock a MAGA hat anytime soon, but they look at the world and they say, what are my options? And I think a lot of people like Robert are going to come around to that same conclusion. And if Donald Trump wins, there will be a faction of his supporters who just insist that this is obviously everybody worshiping at the altar of MAGA. And that's not true. Now, it doesn't take anything away from him. Trump's got a base unlike anything we've seen in modern American politics. It's not taking anything away from him, right? It's not. But he won't win exclusively because of that. He will win, yes, because of an incredible political base that he's built up, combined with the fact that regular people are like, this ain't working. These economic policies ain't working. These foreign policies ain't working. And I don't want my daughters being told they've got to compete against guys who think they're girls. And they will go out there, just like Robert is talking about, and they'll go vote for Donald Trump. So just, it's always much more complex and there's much more to it than some people are going to turn this into come November 5th. It is going to be because of millions of Americans, potentially, who may come together and say, I'm done with the crazy. And I have two choices here. Elections are binary options, and I can't keep going down this road. And I cannot tell my daughters and my granddaughters that I voted for a guy who is protecting men in competition against women, John.
Life seems to get a little simpler as I get older, I think. Not worried about either person, Trump's not coming to my house for dinner, that kind of stuff. It's about the policies, man. Get over the people.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people who absolutely are starting to realize that.
Right.
And
yeah.
I think Robert's in that, he's definitely in that. Babylon Bee they're satirical, obviously. Their CEO, Seth Dillon, was here in Kansas City about 10 days ago for the Kansans for Life event that I had a chance to MC, and he did a great job. Babylon Bee had some fun with this over the weekend. Headline, Biden says when it comes to college women's sports, may the best man win.
Come on, man.
The article notes, in a move that experts predicted would alter the course of history in women's athletics, President Joe Biden announced that when it comes to college women's sports, may the best man win. With the changes made to Title IX, Biden officially ruled that men are now eligible to compete and dominate women's sports, leaving female college athletes to fend for themselves in a landscape that will now be every man for himself. Biden said in a statement, here's the deal, folks. When a gal is really a lady, she is eligible to play with the other ladies. When a fella identifies as a broad, he should be just as eligible to compete with the gals. No one should be allowed to discriminate against these athletes and bar them from women's sports simply because they have the in between their legs, they have the things. Prefargenbarner. That's the that's the end of the statement. Obviously, just a made-up word because that's how the guy speaks sometimes. While critics say the new changes would mark the end of competitive women's college sports, proponents of the announcement hailed it as a historic milestone. It's a new era, said Phil Sanderson, who hopes to make the Georgetown University women's softball team next year. Quote, gone are the days of women just getting their sporting events to themselves. I'm going to be out on that field next year, and I'm going to straight up manhandle some of these chicks because I'm a lady now. That's from the Babylon Bee. Well, good luck to Phil. We'll be following his collegiate career as he takes on the Big East softball scene next year. I mean, this is freaking ridiculous. And, it's satire, but it's not that far off from the world that we are living in right now, from the crazy that we find ourselves in today. Now, if you can't laugh at this stuff, I can't help you. You have to laugh at it. If you can't solve some of this with humor, you're going to go nuts. I mean, if I just sat here, banging a drum and acting like my head was going to explode, I'm telling you, it would not be good for the show. So you need the humor to break up some of the crazy of what we find ourselves in right now.